Topic here is helped into power. Looking at the questions here, which come from the video Warning from History, episode number 1, helped into power. These are the questions that are addressed. For example, the Nazi promise and the German economy. We are also looking at the excerpt from the book Germans into Nazis. And in that particular piece there, the questions that the author addresses: what motivated the Germans to vote for the Nazi party? Were the Germans anti-Semitic? Just a whole host of other items. Looking at this chart here, as the economy starts to crumble, Nazi support moves up. That seems to be another item that is addressed in the reading. When we look at this particular image here, I just did a search for World War I or World War II, Weimar Republic economy, and you see some images of children playing with German money. And that should give you an idea of the value of German money from the interwar period. For the most part, German citizens are being asked to vote between these three groups, these three ideas. Are they going to be a fascist state supporting and voting for the Nazis, the Weimar Republic, which was the government that's put in place after World War I in what becomes known as the interwar period, or will they vote for the Communist Party, the Bolshevik Party? So these would be your three options if you're a German citizen voting in the election that will eventually put Hitler in office in 1933. So according to the author of the book, Germans into Nazis, they talk about whether or not the Germans were victims of circumstance. And, you want to think about that as we look at how the Nazis come into power. Here we see a photograph, the cover of the book, Germans into Nazis. Interesting thing about this photograph, I read this when I was in college, and they were making a big old thing about the fact that the author was able to find Hitler in this photograph, which is a photograph of the Germans entering World War One. I think they later debunked this. I don't quite know. I haven't followed that story. I just remember hearing the debate and remembering that particular book. So the author brings up the question, were the Germans anti-Semitic or were they drawn to Nazism? And according to the author, Germans were drawn to anti-Semitism because they were drawn to the Nazis, not the other way around. So this is looking at the question of whether or not the Germans had a hatred towards the Jewish people before the Nazis, or was this something that the Nazis inspired within the German population? Which brings up the question here, if you wanted to assign blame for what ultimately happens, looking at the groups here, how much blame would you put aside for these particular groups? For example, do the German people bear any responsibility for voting the Nazis and Hitler into power? How much blame does Hitler have? It's just a debate question here as far as responsibility for what ultimately happens in Germany. The author brings up the issue of the Versailles Treaty. According to the author, the German people felt the Treaty of Versailles and the reparation payment is mandated to be harsh and extreme. That is definitely something that comes up when you look at the end of World War I and that Treaty of Versailles. In this section, we're just pretty much doing a true or false section. Germans were angry about the Treaty of Versailles, according to the author. I would say that definitely is true. During World War I, we also looked at this slide here, which looked at this excerpt from Hitler in a speech dated January 30th, 1937. Keep in mind, Hitler is already in power from 33 going to 37. In his speech, Hitler is saying that he declares a section of the Versailles Treaty which deprive our nation of the rights that is shared on equal footing. So definitely Hitler seemed to have used the Versailles Treaty as a way to rally the German people. Germans after World War I were anti-Semitic. We kind of already addressed this issue, whether or not the Germans, developed a hatred for the Jewish people, as a result of the Nazi ideology, or was it something that was already in place prior to the German Nazis coming to power? Germans turned to Nazis when banks collapsed. The author addressed this particular point and said when the middle class and the banks started to collapse, more people voted for the Nazis. So again, as the German economy goes down, Nazi support seems to go up. And that's something that usually comes up in elections. Here I looked at the Roosevelt-Hoover election, with the Depression. Again, same logic applies here. As the U.S. economy collapses, support for alternatives, Roosevelt being one, starts to take place. You can even look at the Obama presidency when Bush, the economy, the last couple of months of Bush presidency, the Republicans had controlled so much of D.C. during Bush's administration, and so they take the blame. As the U.S. economy goes down, support for all the alternatives go up, and if you were paying attention in August for that particular election, you start to see as the economy starts to collapse and AIG and the auto industry collapse, support for Barack Obama started to increase. This one here, looking at the 2020 election, using the COVID response. I guess you could take different events, not necessarily just the economy, but if the, government's response to a crisis, in this case being COVID, starts to be problematic, people start to look to alternatives. True or false? Americans are angry about the economy will vote against their current government, and the history seems to say that that's true. Support for the U.S. president decreases as the economy decreases. And again, that seems to be true. Usually, the one in charge is the one that's going to take the blame. True or false? Americans vote for their interests. I would say that's true. What about people in general? Do they vote for their interests? Going back to the helped into power clip here, again, if we're looking at the options for the German people, if the Weimar Republic, using the logic from, these points before about the economy, why would you vote for the Weimar Republic to stay in power? That would be a vote for the same. The German socialists, these individuals, the question here is, are they looking out for the best interests of Germany, or are they looking out for the best interests of spreading communism? Keep in mind, one of the campaign songs said that the German proletariat wanted to bloody the face of the ruling class. And if that's the case, probably not going to vote for the German socialists. So if these are my options, if these are the individuals that are in power taking the blame for the economic crisis, these individuals, if I'm wealthy, are saying they want to remove my economic status, then I think the only option I have are the Nazis. If those are my three, and of course I could decide not to vote in the election as well. Keep in mind, as the Germans come to power, they will also develop certain policies. One of the things that Germany is dealing with in the interwar period between World War I and World War II is this economic crisis. And one of the things the Germans do, which is actually pretty sinister, they start to look at different groups of people and, attaching, worth and value. And here in this particular image, they're looking at sterilization of the unfit, because the unfit could possibly be, a burden to society. That issue will be addressed later on. For example, here they're looking at here we see the German, man lifting, in this case, people that are unfit, people that are a burden on society. And here they're looking at the value, and they're looking at the particular point. These individuals cost the state money. And, although these people are German, they also, from the Nazi view, are a burden on the German state. And that's what is being problematic for this individual. The Nazis definitely were also anti-Semitic and concerned about race, as this particular children's book shows, where they are looking at, the various races, and this children's book kind of goes on using that particular theme. So this is a page from that children's book. The father of the Jews is the devil. And notice all of the various groups here that are designed to represent racial groups according to the Nazi ideology. Here we see a political cartoon that's targeting the Jewish people, again blaming the Jewish people for all of the ills that Germany is encountering, which is possibly part of the reason why some Germans voted for the Nazis. You see an image pulling the Jewish teacher from a classroom. One thing you have to say about the Nazis, they definitely were patriotic and nationalistic. You can buy these flags and display them outside of your home. Germany also developed a Strength Through Joy program, which was designed to really bring the poor people of Germany to experience some sort of middle-class status. And they did that by making sure that, people working in factories had pretty good conditions, and you could even apply to go on vacation. And all of that's designed to try to keep the German people supportive of the Nazi Party. And that's the Strength Through Joy program, which comes from the book Strength Through Joy. And here we go with the closure questions. How does Hitler come to power? Again, you can't look at that question without having an understanding of the German economy. And then I think the more important question is this one. What do you learn about Hitler's rise to power?